Hey everyone. In this video, I'm reading my thoughts and observations on Beowulf. These observations assume that you have either read Beowulf or that you are familiar with the plot of Beowulf. There's an interesting moment in Beowulf when Unferth lends his sword to Beowulf to fight Grendel's mother in her underwater lair. Unferth, of course, had previously challenged Beowulf's heroism when the warrior arrived at Heorot. Beowulf addresses Unferth's challenge with words, not might, by demonstrating his command of language and storytelling. On the banks of the unholy lake that harbors Grendel's mother, it is the sword Hrunting that has an impressive story, not Unferth, of whom we mainly know two things: that he is, quote, admired by all for his mind and courage, end quote, and that he killed his brothers. Citation lines 1165 to 1166. Nothing else is known for certain about Unferth's backstory or why he had to kill his brothers, but surely this detail is significant considering that fratricide, specifically the biblical murder of Abel by his brother Cain, is the very sin that spawned Grendel's mother and Grendel himself. Both creatures are descendants of Cain, their monstrosity an inherited curse brought down by God as punishment for Cain's sin. Interestingly, Unferth's reputation is strong despite his own fratricide. But Beowulf does suggest in the earlier encounter that Unferth's reputation is more the product of talk than action, and that he will pay for the sin he has committed in the afterlife. Long quotation. Now I cannot recall any fight you entered, Unferth, that bears comparison. I don't boast when I say that neither you nor Brecca were ever much celebrated for swordsmanship or for facing danger on the field of battle. You killed your own kith and kin, so for all your cleverness and quick tongue, you will suffer damnation in the depths of hell. End quotation, citation lines 582 to 589. Of course, damnation in hell implies the possibility of salvation. This is one of many Christian elements to an epic that often mentions the Almighty, but never refers to Christ as a vehicle for that salvation. I suggest that Beowulf captures a transition from a world where redemption is impossible, a world of inherited evil, bloody revenge, and paganistic rites, to a world where forgiveness can be earned socially and spiritually. One way of earning forgiveness in the epic is through money. Beowulf's debt to Hrothgar, for instance, is the product of Hrothgar's willingness to pay a settlement in a blood feud involving Beowulf's father. According to custom, the murder of a family member must be avenged unless the murderer is able to financially reimburse the family for its loss. There is a striking contrast between Hrothgar's using money to help Beowulf's father and Beowulf's saving Hrothgar by battling two monsters. Beowulf's actions strike us as so much more heroic that we are taken aback a little when Beowulf implies that he is still indebted to Hrothgar. But there is no indication that Hrothgar's payment is seen as less honorable, even if it is not particularly heroic. If anything, the need for Beowulf to resort to arms is a byproduct of the monsters' inability to pay financially for the lives they have taken. They are remnants of a time when this more civilized and peaceful resolution was not available. But the monsters are also remnants of a time when a spiritual reconciliation was also unavailable, at least in this life. The inherited curse and banishment of the two monsters appears to be the very cause of Grendel's attack. He is enraged to hear people merry and singing of an Almighty who has punished him for the crime of an ancestor. It is fitting that Beowulf must kill Grendel's mother with her own sword and not Unferth's. As we learn, modern weapons are useless, perhaps because they represent a world where honor and redemption can be achieved and lost. In a way, the sword of Grendel's mother represents a different, darker inheritance, one that cuts down its own inheritors. But Beowulf also suggests that these descendants of Cain are not entirely without hope. They are the ones, quote, who strove with God time and again until he gave them their reward, end quote. Citation lines 113 to 114. This surprising detail suggests a God who was merciful towards those from a time when salvation could not be earned, those whose sin and monstrosity were not chosen. In contrast, Unferth comes from a time where people are not destined to be spiritually or socially banished, where redemption is possible. The cost of living in this world, though, is the possibility of eternal damnation. While we do not know if this is truly Unferth's fate, Hrothgar's words after Beowulf's second victory suggest another possibility. Quote, choose, dear Beowulf, the better part, eternal rewards. Do not give way to pride. End quote. Citation lines 1759 to 1760. Unferth's giving Beowulf his sword is an act of humility, one that does have a social cost, his, quote, fame and repute, line 1471. But Unferth's action aligns as much as anyone's with Hrothgar's ultimate lesson, that while heroism is a virtue, overvaluing fame and repute is a recipe towards spiritual damnation and social ruin. Even though Unferth's sword proves useless against the monster, Unferth's act of humility may represent a path unavailable to the descendants of Cain, the path of spiritual self-redemption. Thank you for listening.